Hey, folks. I was told that you could stay seated, but I think everyone should stand up. You guys have been out here for a while. You've been in these chairs. We are the last session, and we want to have a really enjoyable conversation with you and really talk about where product development is heading. So thank you so much for being here. It's been awesome to share this space and this time with you. And I hope it's opened your thinking for when you return to your teams. And you probably have already fired off a few slacks. So let's get started. Cool, we have some people filing in. I'm going to go ahead and start us off. So you know that in this world right now, it's kind of funny because I had a friend who was coming back from a meditation retreat, and he stayed at our house and left a pamphlet on our dining room table. I turned it and I opened it, and it said something that has stuck with me. And it was a question. It said, "Are you bracing or are you embracing?" And I work in software. I'm also a human. So I'm sure that many of us can relate to this. Are you bracing or are you embracing? And it seems to me that so many of us at all of our companies are either finding our teams and our businesses in one of these two states. Either let's go, let's embrace the impact that AI can have, or bracing for the impact of AI. What will it do for our teams? What will it do for our business? What will it do for my role? And when I thought about this conversation with you, I was like, wow, I'm going to be talking to Mike, the CPO at Anthropic. What does it feel like to be leading product development at probably one of the most AI-curious, AI-forward organizations? Yes, you're developing products and models at the same time, but tell me a bit more about what it means to work and embrace the future of AI within your product development org.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. I think we're the last session, so hope you had an awesome config. It's really interesting living at this edge of AI sort of internal capability piece. So as an example of where it gets weird in I think a good way, we have a Ask Claude Figma Slack channel where you can ask Claude anything, and it's it's crawled all our internal docs and everything, and other channels. But it's public by default, which, at first people were using it what's our vacation policy? Or, hey, what's this weird code name mean? Stuff that you might ask, kind of an internal search tool. But then people realize it knows about the whole company. It knows about everybody. It has a whole knowledge graph that we built about the company. So performance review season was upon us 3 weeks ago. People realized it can actually write our self-reviews, but it's a public channel. So I'm like, are people going to do this? So you start seeing this stream of people being please summarize my accomplishments this last half based on what you know about me. And what's really interesting about this is I think there's still, even within Anthropic, this push-pull of, is it okay to use AI for something? Is it okay to admit that I used AI for something? I just wrote a long strategy doc yesterday, and I was proudly I used our new model for this. And I think that's part of showing that it's not to be feared or to feel shame. It's and the thing that matters was it good on the other side, and did you properly prompt it? But that sort of public by default thing I think is really interesting. And so when I think about, because we work with a lot of companies that are thinking about deploying AI internally, because we have Claude for Work, how do you model, right? And we have some, sharing features in there. I think we need to do a lot more actually to show what is the right use. One of our product managers talks about company entropy. You're going to get way more interesting stuff if 100 people are using AI and seeing what's happening in there than one person in a silo that maybe figures something out and maybe sort of deploys a better way of doing it. So that's been a lot of what I've been thinking about internally, but also in how in terms of that gets deployed. How do you make it visible? How do you not make it oh, did you use that AI for that? No, definitely not. I did it all myself. Or I just brainstormed with AI at the beginning. We'd be yeah, but is it good or not?
That's so much about norm setting and comforts and behaviors of the team. What about systematic things that are different, either about the way you organize, the tools you choose to use, the way you hire? What has changed for you versus maybe your time at Instagram?
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'll start from the interview process. So I feel really strongly that every product manager coming in has like facility using the like AI tools, and of course they're not going to be as steeped in it as somebody who's been working at Anthropic for a while. But we have you do an exercise where you start from a problem statement, and we actually use Claude in Google Sheets, which is like a plugin we have, but it's like a good example of like, all right, here's the goal you have, like get Claude to meet that prompt. And again, we're not testing for, are you the world's best Claude prompter, but we are testing for like, can you think in conjunction with these models, right? So that's an important part of how we think in even the recruiting process. And then a lot of the product development process, what we find is just almost at every stage. I wrote this doc to start the year, which is, we do a lot of work in the coding domain. Of course, our models power a lot of the sort of emerging coding tools, but we should be thinking about them from a product org perspective too. So when you're writing the spec, like, are you doing it in conjunction with Claude? Are you actually having that conversation? When you're in design mode, are you brainstorming ideas? I've been talking to our designers and how they do this before even Figma Make, but like, how do you interact between your designs and then what gets presented and shown? When you even vet like designs, I've had designers like take screenshots of their Figmas and then put them in Claude and have Claude critique it as well before it comes to crit. And I think that's like another interesting way of incorporating that as well. And is it perfect? No, but is it another voice that might point something out? It can be. And then all the way to like taking processes that previously were very frustrating and making them easy. So if you've been on a product development team shipping code, you probably have gone through like security review, penetration testing, all these things. And we actually like have Claude as our first line security researcher now. So before anything gets deployed, the engineer in charge or the PM in charge has to have like this very like structured but extensive conversation with Claude, where it's been sort of preset to like really analyze what's going on with the release. And it just cut the time for review down from weeks to days, because now when you actually do get to the security like second line person, it's not like we're starting from scratch, like what does your feature do? And it's more like we've already identified these three areas. So like I really am trying to instill in the product team like what role can AI play in every single one, partly because I think it's interesting and can make us better as a team, but also it also really highlights where the models still have to get better and where our products still have to get better. So it's like, we call it ant fooding because Anthropic employees are ants, it's a thing. So like when we're ant fooding, like it's not just our products, but it's also the models and doing both at the same time.
Man, ant sure makes it cute. That makes me think about kind of the design goals. What you were saying is that conversation around security, or kind of like that first line of defense, there's a gut check. What about creative partnership or prototyping? What other behaviors feel net new, or maybe matching what people say they want to do versus are actually doing in practicality, are you seeing on the team?
I'm seeing, like, I think there's kind of two main areas. One is the rise of just the non-engineer building some internal tool because it solves like a business problem or something that they hit every day. And also the non-engineer and often the designer, like building prototypes that are interactive and rich before any line of code actually gets written by a human. So on the first part, if you've used Claude Code, which is our like agentic coding product, it's primarily engineer oriented. It lives primarily in the terminal. It's like not really, at least in its current incarnation, meant for a non-technical audience. But again, being Anthropic, like everybody's curious to try these tools. And so just this morning, one of our growth marketers was like, hey, I had, it was actually another Figma adjacent thing. Like I had all these Figmas of the ads we wanted to run for Claude. And I needed to like generate all these variants for all the different places where I'm running. And I also wanted to try these 8 like copy, different things. And I was like, I'm not sure how to do it. And then he's like, oh, I bet I could get Claude Code to write a Figma plugin to do it. And he spent a day and he got Claude Code to do it. And now all the campaigns that we run are actually being automated through this thing that a growth marketing manager who's never written a line of code in their life before had put together. And so
sounds like a Buzz feature request. What do you think?
Yeah, it's totally this like, it's like that internal like can I automate?
Yeah, but what about the design system?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what is like. What does it look like on is it mobile responsive yet, But on the second piece, I think is also interesting on that prototyping front, which is at a PM that was like very like frustrated because he didn't feel like their idea was like getting the time of day where like it wasn't being understood and it wasn't getting translated well. And finally he's like, I'm just going to like actually just mock this up using like artifacts inside Claude.ai. And then people are like, oh, I get what you were talking about. And like it's interactive and it goes beyond that piece as well. And so like time to prototype coming down, I mean, obviously very aligned with what you all are working on with Figma Make, I think is a very, very positive development for like idea validation.
Yeah. What I'm excited about is for years, everyone I work with have wanted to be a prototype first team.
Yeah.
Like, can we get this together quickly and put it in front of customers? And I think a big misunderstanding with tools like Make are, here's the final product.
Right.
Like, this is the answer. I see this as the beginning of the question. This is what you take to a customer, you take to your team,
Yeah.
and it's the beginning of a conversation. And I'm so excited that the product development process used to be, ideate, align, define, design, develop, ship. And now you can start in the middle. You can start near the end.
Yeah.
But the thinking still has to be full circle.
Yeah.
And that is the piece where I'm really curious about how product development is changing
Yeah.
and what's going to change in our stack and in our habits that you're maybe seeing already or most excited about.
I mean, I think most people don't like the way in which most people, I think, underestimate or maybe misuse AI today is that they like think of it like, right, I would have done this myself and it would have taken me 20 minutes. I can use, AI for it and maybe it'll take me less time or I can go do something else. But actually what AI is also really good at is, it's like that scene at the end of, I think it's Arrival, where it's like the multiverse and it's like all the things are happening. Like it can explore a bunch of things in parallel, right? Like, it's always like people are like, oh, I asked Claude to like name this feature. And it's like, well, did you ask it for one idea or like 50? Because it can come up with 50 and maybe the right one wasn't the first one, but like the 35th one was the right one. It's funny if you do this, by the way, like you can tell it starts running out of ideas at like 100 and you're like, okay, like anybody is like kind of running on fumes. You're like, hey, you said that one already. And they're like, I'm sorry. Trying to sneak it in there. But I think the same is true on designs and prototypes. Like exploring variations, I think is really interesting. Like going into UXR, not with that one idea that you had and were really attached to, but 3 variants. And it doesn't have to just be like surface level. And it could be like pretty different approaches to solving that. So I think it doesn't diminish the role of UXR. In fact, it increases it and makes it even more a part of like what we do, but we try to bring in like variants and variations in there. So I think that's a big part. The other one is, still like people are sleeping on AI and like Claude's ability to also be the like Wizard of Oz. I mean, I like was an HCI, undergrad and masters, and we talked a lot about Wizard of Oz prototyping. And for us, it was literally us being like in the back, being like, oh, they typed hello, like type hello back, in the chat screen. But Claude is actually, a phenomenal sort of role player. It can pretend to be a JSON API endpoint. It can also pretend to be an entire intelligence. Like I was not going to side project that I was doing, I was like, oh, it'd be interesting to do this like meal logging in a different way. And I was like, I am not going to go like figure out how to like integrate this meal database. But I'm like, I bet Claude is like pretty good at guessing based on inputs, and it is. And it was like, oh, here's an image, like, oh, that's about like 100 grams of chicken or something like that. So it all of a sudden that idea was like, that would have been 4 hours of yak shaving and API integration. Instead, it was like a prompt in the backend, and all of a sudden it's now a fully functional prototype.
The Wizard of Oz piece is totally a place where I had underestimated AI. What are the places where you think we're overestimating?
I think people get attached still to like, AI, like we now have AI software engineers. Like we have AI coding agents, right? It's like, it's not the job. So I think we still overestimate like AI's ability to be members of the team or doing an entire job function. Because you think about it, there's so much more than that. It's like people often ask the question, if we've made engineers 20, 30, 40% faster, why aren't we shipping 20, 30, 40% faster? It's like, well, it's really clear. Like there's other bottlenecks that really quickly emerge, right? Alignment, design to engineer handoff, like iteration, like the feedback speed that you actually get, coordinating launches with external partners, like all these things still really matter. And so similarly for other job functions, like rather than start at like, how can this AI be like a salesperson? It's like, well, like being a salesperson is like at a company is a really multifaceted job. They're probably on a small team. They probably coordinate with other people, right? But could it be a really helpful accelerant for this task that they do? For sure. And like, so underestimating how good they are at given tasks, but overestimating how much of like a
full function
thing it ends up being.
Yeah, that makes me think about how people tend to talk about what AI can do. There's such a narrative around efficiency. Like, let's do the same stuff faster with AI. Same inputs, go further. It seems to miss that with AI, our intuition about the cost of something is off. Like, newly something that you thought would be a quarter of work is not a quarter of work.
Yeah.
And I am really excited about this push for like AI less for efficiency, like yes, we should totally do that, but AI for opportunity, like going after bigger, harder problems because there are more tools in our toolkit.
Yeah, absolutely. Or building products that, I would think about this often. It's like the company I was working on before at Anthropic was called Artifact, and like we did a lot around like AI to like make news reading easier. And like all of these were like these would have been 3-6 month engineering projects. It would have required a large team, but all of a sudden, again, it's almost Wizard of Oz, but at scale. It's like, and then you can find a way of like cutting down the cost as well, and trying to make it workable. And like I think that's like another, like people often ask me like how to think about building when the models change so quickly. I think like the two dimensions that like I really ask our internal folks to think about, but I think it applies externally as well, is like the models are certainly going to get smarter and they're going to get better and more robust at like using tools and acting agentically over long periods of time. So like if it's falling down on some use case there, like still build towards the edge of that use case, and then like you're ready when the next model comes out. Make 6 months ago probably wouldn't have worked without 3.7 Sonnet, right? There's like definitely that evolution. But the other one is price as well, right? When I think about like, at Artifact, we didn't really reach like massive scale, and it was pretty early in like the AI API space. But I often talk to customers of our API that are like, okay, like this is still expensive. It's still a like $200 plan we have to sell, but like 3-6 months from now, maybe it's a $20 a month plan we sell, and we can reach like more scale. So we're seeing this in our like model capabilities generation on generation. And I think that's also true in like end user products and like what's possible now. It's okay to sell to like the very determined pro user. You think you have a line of sight to becoming eventually something that you can maybe fine tune into a smaller model, for example.
Yeah. Let's talk about model capabilities. How should we think about the space and model divergence, model convergence? Like what's going to happen over the next few years? And maybe this is related to what you're excited about on your roadmap. Maybe this is just kind of how you see the various model players.
Yeah, I think, and maybe this is me channeling the fact that I'm at fundamentally a design conference, but I think people like models don't just emerge from the ether. They are a product of like research, and like that's obviously a lot of like hard math and science, but it's also a lot of taste, right? Like what goes into the pre-training mix? Like what are the environments that we're training the model in? Like what are the instructions that we give it? That's a huge piece. Like, and what's the like environment, like literally the UX that we surround it with? Like all of those are actually design decisions. We just don't talk about them that way. And to that degree, like different companies are going to make different design decisions. And it's why, you'll talk to somebody and they'll be like, I'm more of a Claude person. And somebody else is like, can be, I'm more of a like, O3 mini person. I don't know. It's like, there's more like affinity towards certain things. And so I think that those end up diverging more over time because one, like cultures attract people similar to them. So that's one piece. But two, like they also attract users that are after a certain kind of experience. Like, Claude has like, we try to make it very empathetic and conversational, and some people really like that. Then I was talking to a reporter. I'm like, man, why don't you use Claude more? He's like, I don't like any personality in my AI. Like, I don't like it. Like, I want the driest thing possible. I'm like, okay, like fair enough. Like that's different strokes, And so I think, it leads to also like models being spiky and things like coding. Like that's been a real strength of ours. It wasn't an accident. It was like a lot of very determined kind of effort.
Yeah, I'm really excited to engage with AI without as many follow-up questions.
Yeah.
I know it drives usage. I get it, but
it's definitely a thing. I think in 3.7 Sonnet, we got a little bit too much on the follow-up, and sometimes you're like, "No, I'm done. I don't need you to answer." Like, because you feel compelled to answer.
I just told you what I decided. I gave that feedback so you could remember it. I wasn't asking for more feedback.
Yeah.
Does that resonate?
Yes.
Yeah. Everyone in the crowd, think about what question you wish I was asking, because we are going to have time for a couple of questions before we close here. So you are a product leader and you have product leader problems. Tell me what are the practical things that we ought to be doing or changing about the way we work to just scale ourselves, have more impactful days?
I mean, I think I'll like back at Instagram, like in the last couple of years there, we got like really interested in like Principles by Ray Dalio, and like the book's like has some like provocative ideas about like internal transparency. And I remember at the time thinking like, the book is crazy. Like they video record every meeting, like never, and like they publish it internally. And I thought that was like the craziest thing ever. And we tried it on Instagram, but actually it's like when you're primarily an in-person company, it's very hard to do it without being extremely awkward. Like there's a video camera in the corner, and like we at Anthropic operate very differently. Like we use Meet for basically all of our meetings, and that means that like we record like by default almost all of our meetings, and then we have Claude actually like read the transcripts and email anybody who couldn't attend. And so like all of a sudden you're like, like that actually changes the dynamic. What I want to be building towards, and we have this like fun like deck that Joel, our head of design, put together, is like at what point is actually Claude in the Meet not just listening as like the robot note taker or whatever, but also the like participant, like, hey, you said you were going to follow up on this thing and you didn't yet, or like, hey, I'm hearing that like nobody's really talking about this thing that's like really the elephant in the room. Like, I can't wait for that, right? So I love the idea of the models like my goal is for them to make us like hopefully like better friends and coworkers and et cetera. And the way they can do it is kind of like pointing out our blind spots. I use it all the time where like I'll write strategy documents, and the first thing I do before publishing is I give it to Claude. I'm like poke holes in this. What did I miss? Like, what am I not talking about? And I think it could do that even as a teammate. I mean, it sounds like a little out there, but I think it'll really start happening. And so I think that like one of the product person problems that I think I have is that like eventually like truth-telling gets harder in an organization. Of course, you try to encourage that with culture and like office hours and Q&As. Like, there's all the human ways you do it, but like I'm also like pretty bullish on like these like more impartial, less worried about offending you, aspects of AI is like being able to help there.
Yeah. A question I imagine we might have here is around how the role of design changes and expands with this like massive change in the tool set. I personally think over the next 3 years, we're going to have a Cambrian explosion of apps. And I believe the differentiation is going to be design.
Yeah.
Full stop. Point of view, customer problem, craft. I wonder what the conversation is internally about scaling and growing the design team, how to think about the design organization at Anthropic.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I think of it almost like back to like my Instagram days when we were like kind of at the forefront of like mobile being a new platform where all of a sudden you didn't need 100 people working on a thing that was like me and Kevin building Instagram. Like I was like maybe view one of this, and like we still have to like write all this like awful Objective-C, and now it's like you did a lot more with AI. It definitely, I see design as like the way in which like we like manifest thinking into reality, and like that's very much like the way we lean on our design team. Like I'll have like a strategy doc that I've like vetted or whatever, but then it's like making it tangible or even like translating it into like a thing that actually solves user problems is like fundamentally like what our design team needs to continue to do. Like only becomes more important now. So that's been interesting. I'd say like the biggest way in which I've seen some of our hiring shift is actually getting people who are more willing to get a little bit further into the building process, sometimes all the way towards like design engineering, but even at least like hey, like we want to prototype this idea in Cloud AI. We think we can now do it with Cloud Code. If I have like never like been in our code base before, but like, can use Cloud Code, like definitely our designers can as well. And so that's been the shift, like maybe moving more of design into like maybe not the full on build process sometimes, but even just the like, let's shape the initial version through that. And I think that's a skill we'll continue to hire for.
Okay, we have time for one question for the crowd, and then we'll do one more question up here. We've got a microphone going around. Anyone? Yes. In the center, if you want to shout, we're a small enough room. I'll repeat it.
Yeah, so I'm curious, like, a lot of people love Claude for its, like, unique humanist kind of tone. Can you talk about how kind of being deep and you guys happen to have, I think, like the best model for coding now. It's very tasteful. People talk about like if Steve Jobs was around, he would probably be a user of Claude, and I agree with that. Can you talk about like not spreading out too wide, where you could have gone into like image gen and voice and a lot of other areas, but just like becoming the very best at these new models that you're developing, and kind of how that was a conscious choice in conversations inside the company? I'd just be curious about that.
Yeah, one of the coolest things about joining Anthropic, like it was the first company I like joined rather than founded. So it was like this process of like, what's it going to be like, and how many of the Instagram like principles that we used to like tell every new hire and talk about all hands like are also like in some version at Anthropic too. Like we used to talk about doing the simple thing first. The Anthropic value is what is it? It's like do the simple thing that works really close, right? And then one of ours was do fewer things better. I think that's very much in the ethos of like what we do. Like we're not trying to do every possible modality under the sun. And like I'm sure like there are interesting things that we could be doing in that space, but I think it's much more interesting to be like, all right, like there's two things we really focus on the model side. Is like, can the model like act agentically in interesting ways? And that's coding first, but really other things as well. If you look at products that are emerging now that are like not necessarily just coding products, but they're just solving a problem, but doing it over multiple steps. And then being a really good empathetic like conversationalist and writer. And it's like, that is the real focus. It's like, if you ask our chief science officer, he's like, if you want to do like curiosity-based research, Anthropic is not the place for you. Like, we're actually pretty directive around like what are the areas that we care about. But I think it's been to our benefit there.
No doubt. What are you most excited about?
Oh, well, we've got new models coming out, which I'm super excited about.
You heard it here
like,
first.
You know, it's here first. You know, I'm always like hammering on them internally. So that's one. But the second one is like everybody since I started has been like talking about like, oh, like the chatbot, like why do we like have we like converged on this local maximum of like the chatbot being like the main UI for these AI models, at least in the context that we have them in, like on a ChatGPT or a Cloud AI. And like within the last like month, I would say like our team has coalesced on the vision of like what comes after that. I'm sounding really vague, but like in general, like how do we actually make this approachable and interesting to people? Because like I still feel like there's an incredible overhang around the capabilities of these products and models and how people actually use them. They're still mostly using them for like fancy search, right? And so like I'm very excited for us to like flip that on its head so that like if a year from now it's like config again and you're still primarily interacting with Claude on Claude.ai, like in a chat box, like come like, I don't know, punch me in the shoulder. It's like, you know, we'll have failed because there's a lot that we can do much better there. So
Bye-bye, box.
Yeah, exactly.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much for spending
Thank
time
you,
with
Paige.
us today. We're looking forward to the next.
Thank you all.